Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Sofi Weekly. You'll notice a couple things. One, Tevis is looking a lot better today. And Roy is also in dark mode. If Sofi's under $10, he is not happy, ladies and gentlemen. So he's not turning the lights back on until we get to $10. Now, Tevis will be showing up. I just wanted to be on time so you guys are aware. I was not late. Okay? Tim, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
So, well, so to speak. Given the situation, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah. Roy, buy any SoFi stock this week?
No. I sold. Not the stock, but options. We can talk about it, but
what about
it's a good time to delever.
Yeah, I bought. I increased my position by 2%. I advised everybody not to, and I did anyway. But I'm in a different situation than most people. So,
well. Look who it is. How are you?
Hey, what's going on?
Still setting up, eh?
Yep.
Can't blame it on me this time.
It's still your fault. What's up, Tim? How's it going? Good time.
Pretty good.
Tevis, did you buy SoFi stock?
No. Can you
no SoFi stock this week?
Order? No, I didn't buy.
Is it like this?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Also, is my camera mirrored? Is this wrong? Do I look weird?
You look normal.
I think that's normal.
I think I'll buy eventually. I need to find money first, and then I'll buy.
I actually did buy a little bit of SoFi, funnily enough.
Yeah.
I said I was only going to be buying Robinhood over SoFi, but it was just falling way too fast, and so I bought a little bit. But
did you buy with the money that Vlad gave you?
That's funny. You're clever. He did not pay me. No one that went to that event was paid, as far as I'm aware. Brad Freeman also said that as well, being someone who was invited. But what's it called? No, I bought mainly Nvidia. Okay, and then Hood, and then Amazon and SoFi.
And you must have a lot of Nvidia shares to be able to use the Nvidia dividend that aggressively.
Yeah, it's not that strong of a dividend, but what did you guys think? How do we get started here? I mean, what a crazy, boring week this was. It's like nothing even regular week.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating in weeks like this when you see something interesting on a ticker or on a company, but no one wants to hear it. It's just all macro, and it makes sense. I mean, because a company could, with a few exceptions, come out with just amazing news. It's still going to get sold off. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was telling Tanner this reminds me a lot of 1987 when I woke up and I was actually trading a lot of options and stock, mostly Microsoft and Apple, because those were pretty hot stocks back then. And you wake up and the market's down 20% because you're so heavy in options, you're down 50%. And then in retrospect, I made the classic decision, like the next couple of days, that kind of drifted down a little bit more, and I just sold all my Apple and Microsoft stock. And if I had just held on to that, I would never have to invest anything ever. But so it's but it feels a lot like that because the market was high for a long period of time. The interest rates were getting to be a problem, and it just came out of nowhere, right? It came out of nowhere. This one's a little bit different because it was basically structured, through the tariff stuff. And like I said last week, I told a couple people, but I actually posted. I said, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And primarily, I said that because I know Trump, having represented him, that he never does anything where it's moderate. It's always the maximum pain trying to thrust against people because that's just his nature. that also is also his nature to want to get a deal and everything. So I always think there'll be some deals going on here.
And Tim, I know you're not the only one that's seeing correlation with 1987, feeling those vibes. Jim Cramer said that, live on CNBC. Several other people commented on it too. He posted on it on Twitter a number of times. I've got a video coming out tomorrow morning on basically showing how different the market is now than 1987, that we can't get another repeat that aggressively in a single day anymore, just because some systemic changes, some intentional through the circuit breakers and otherwise. But I was pretty surprised today. Like, we almost hit that 7% circuit breaker. We were like a little bit less than 1% away at one point. And I'm like, okay, wow. Outside of COVID, I think it was 1997 was the only other time that we hit that. It's very rare to have that kind of event. So, we could have a lot more pain on Monday, but it's not going to be a Black Monday, negative 20%.
It's important to note that one of the reasons it dropped so fast in 1987 was it was the beginning of computerized trading. I think that year or maybe a year earlier, and so it exacerbated. And they didn't have any ability to shut the market down, and it was just like, and you didn't have any information, right? So you'd call your broker up and go, "Oh, it's down like 5%." You call them 5 minutes later, it's down 10%. 5 minutes later, and trying to get in an order. The order system wasn't the same either, so you'd have to wait in line. And so it kind of went down, then it went back up, then went down, went up. It was literally crazy. But here, and also, you didn't have as much shorting back then as you do now, because you didn't have much traders or day traders that jump on this and short it. And so I wouldn't be shocked to see the short numbers go way up. I think I read something today that they've already made $900 billion or $800 billion shorting in the last 2 or 3 days.
It's wild.
Crazy, isn't it? That's why I just, in this situation, I told people just stand. I mean, my brother was going to buy some SoFi stock last week, and I said, just hold off until all the tariff stuff's done. And I kind of think that's the same thing now. I bought some because I have some money laying around, and I thought $9 was $8.88 or $9 was pretty low. If it goes down to $8, I lose 80 cents on a few thousand shares. It doesn't really matter. And I don't know if it's DCA. I just buy till shares basically weekly or bi-weekly, depending on what I see. And I thought that was a pretty good deal. So, but I bought a couple other things too. I bought Palantir, and one reason I bought Palantir, it might be overvalued, but I learned back in the 80s, for 15 to 20 years, every time everybody's excuse for never buying Apple or Microsoft was they were always overvalued, and they were always overvalued. But they're only overvalued based on current conditions, not future conditions. So you kind of learn from the past on that. And I think Palantir has a bigger moat than 99% of the companies. And so it was 71. I got it at 70, 72 or something like that today. I bought a little bit of it.
Why are you sucking up to Roy right now? What are you doing?
I'm not. I just think in this kind of environment, people that don't have a lot of competition can hold up more than people that have a lot of competition. And you got to remember, though, put this in perspective. Like people talk about what this Smoot-Hawley and everything like that. Remember today, our market today is 75% services. It was like almost 0% services back then. And so there's a lot of big differences, and people don't realize that back then the banks were so bad you couldn't get access to capital. Nobody had access to capital. Nobody could actually offer competing products in the United States. Nobody was able from other countries to come over here. So there's always these, like Roy was saying about 1987, there's always these imperfect historical comparisons. But that being said, you simplify it as tariffs bad, no tariffs good. But I really think people, what I don't understand is, like, having worked with Donald Trump for 2 years, he's kind of a wild factor, but he always tries to make a deal. I mean, I had a tax case for him. I can't take what it was, but basically he wanted his money back, and I got him, after about a year, I got him all his money back and interest. And when I told him, he said, "That's great." And then the next line he goes, "Can we get any more?" I go, "Get any more from where? What are you talking about?" So when you're dealing with somebody that's kind of irrational at times and just constantly pushes on stuff and over exaggerates, and now everybody believes everything he says. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think there's a lot of overreaction. There's a lot of politics involved in this, but it is interesting how countries are going to respond. So you actually never know how people are going to respond. But
yeah. Tevis, we're hearing everyone buying crazy companies like Palantir right now.
Yeah.
Are you nibbling on anything?
No, I got to get more money in. So probably next week. I've been procrastinating on doing my taxes, honestly, because I haven't had time. But I wanted to save some money for that. But I'm probably just going to push out that payment a little bit and just put more money into the market next week and figure out from there.
What's a little interest, eh?
I mean, like if we're getting 10% dips every day, I can definitely afford the late fees for a couple months. You know. So I have one
like
question.
A form of margin, honestly.
I mean, the other last resort is actually dipping into my margin, which I'm still not doing yet, and I don't think I'm going to be doing it's got to get a little worse than this. But the question I have for you guys is: SoFi closed $9.57. It went as low as $8.88. At what point does Noto start buying?
I thought, I don't know. That's an interesting question because, Vlad sold today. And so if I was Noto, I might throw a couple million. I think it was a pre-scheduled sale, about $31 million. But if I was Noto, just to throw a tweak into the system, I might buy $1 million or a couple $1 million just for the hell of it, just so somebody on some of the YouTube channels says he's selling and he's buying. Who's a better CEO?
Yeah, a couple $1 million just for the memes. I love it.
But you think about it, if it gets 850, he's selling the based on his transaction he did. I forget what that was. It was like the low was 1150 or something like that. Can't remember exactly what it was. You mean? His transaction.
It was $13 was the low.
13 was the low. 8 looks pretty good when you sold for 13.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't rule out that as a possibility, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
He could definitely buy some shares if it keeps dropping lower. I mean, I'm really trying to weigh. So we got a couple different topics. I want to talk about SoFi versus Robinhood. Tim, I know that you have a lot of opinions on that as well, so I want to touch on that. But how do you guys think SoFi as an American company fares in this tariff environment?
Well, directly, there's no direct tariff for them. I mean, banking does okay in a recession, which is, I think, what we're looking at. I think back in 1930, there was like 5% or 6% GDP hit, and I think people were saying this could be like 0.5% to 2% GDP hit, primarily because of the lack of capital and the service differentials. But you'll have secondary or third effects if you have a recession, right? You'll have rates will go down, and that's going to help them. And then the question is will their credit quality keep them from having significant defaults? And will people want to borrow more money? I think they will at lower rates, but people get scared. And I mean, I'm a prime example. When I lost the money in '87, I had literally a ton of money set aside, and I said, I'm going to buy this house. This house is right in front of me. And the next day, I'm like, I'm going to have to put that off for 2 years or 3 years or whatever. I mean,
sure,
lost a substantial amount of money. So, but it's kind of figure out. I don't think they have that much risk because people will want to borrow money, especially if rates are low. People will borrow money, and the question is how it affects unemployment. Because if it affects unemployment greater than just the federal government, you'll probably have some slowdown in member acquisition. You'll probably have some slowdown in loan activity. But they just increased my credit card limit today, so I go to town, borrow on my credit card.
Yeah.
The only thing that I'll add, and I agree completely there, Tim, is that I'm curious how the loan platform business will fare. Is at any point their partners can step in and say, okay, we still have the agreement with you, but slow your roll. We want to just kind of wait and take it easy just to see how things shake out. That can definitely happen. That's a negative impact, though we don't know how much is built in the guidance. And the nice thing about SoFi is, and we said this last year too, when things looked kind of rough and tough, is like they guide very conservatively for themselves with very pessimistic expectations as far as macro. So they don't need a lot of help. They'll be fine in a really tough environment. The one like wild card is like how bad it gets. Like if we see like Great Depression 2.0, which is very, very unlikely, recession, I don't even think is base case at this point, but it's possible. SoFi has not been tested through that, but I mean, they survived COVID, not just survived, but came out the other side very, very well. So
I think, yeah, on that, I think the loan platform business, they'll have demand as interest rates fall, because they got high interest rates products, and it's just a question of credit quality, if they can maintain credit quality. And, I think we went over this before, at least for personal loans. Those loans, even in 2008, fared really well compared to other loans, the high credit quality loans. So they might have actually more demand for their products because people need the higher rates. But it all depends on what people think is significance of how long the tariffs are outstanding, how long, what kind of retaliation, whether it's significant. And like I actually said a couple of days ago, I said, the first country they're going to go after is Vietnam to cut a deal, because that undercuts that whole region. Because if Vietnam makes a deal, Cambodia has to make a deal, Thailand has to make a deal, then South Korea has to make a deal, and then you're surrounding China, which I think is part of his plan, actually. Because then if you get South Korea, you get Japan. So the EU is going to be more difficult because the EU is more stubborn. They've always thought they're the equivalent of the United States. And, in some respects, maybe people think they are. I mean, Germany is a very good business environment, always has been. It's always been difficult to do business in France. UK has always been a good partner, but UK and France have some significant economy problems right now. I mean, France has a lot of aid programs they give it throughout the world, and they've canceled like tons of them, right? UK has a lot of problems, and UK's military is not too big, and now they have to beef up their military. They kind of need the United States. You don't like to see with an ally that has been as great as the UK. It's like, we know we can take advantage of you now, so we're going to. So that's actually an issue. But if you get all this, if you boggle down China by getting deals with everybody else, and nobody trusts China in that region. I had an argument with somebody on X. They said, "Oh well, China, they'll trust China because they don't trust the U.S." No, it's don't. They have historical problems. I mean, Vietnam has historical issues with China about, incursions and wars. Even during the Vietnam War, they had skirmishes on the Chinese border. So,
and like historically, there was people concerned about Korea and Japan, meeting together and in concert. They may on this, but like Japan does not like China and vice versa.
Oh
they
yeah,
have not forgotten World War II there. They have not. So
when we in the 80s, I represented a lot of Japanese real estate companies and Japanese banks, and the difference with doing the business with them in China is in the Japanese culture, in the business culture, at least back then, they won't tell you everything they know, but they won't out and out lie to you. When you open a factory in China, they said you get a whole deal, everything's signed. You open your factory, you're about ready to open, and the local party official comes and say, "We need $3 million as an opening fee." I mean, that happened to one of my clients. We're like, "Well, what are you talking about?" They go, "Well, we can't open like we made $3 million." And they go, "Well, what's the national party going to want?" They go, "We don't know. Why don't you ask them?" And they wanted $3 million. So it's like, but it's not like a put down to the Chinese. It's just that's their business culture. So when you're doing business around the world, you got to actually figure out what those business cultures are. So.
Can I throw up these two slides since you mentioned rate cuts? So one thing with SoFi too is the 10-year yield, and I do think that this is intentional by the administration, has been collapsing. It was actually under 4 at one point today. It stabilized at 4%. It's not at the lows of where it was back in September. Of course, I remember Noto had referenced the yen carry day as well. That was a day where they saw the highest demand that they've seen, I think, ever for their mortgage product. So as this comes down, there are elements of SoFi's business, like the mortgage and, of course, student loans as well, that have been largely frozen and locked that will unlock. Now, the reason for it coming down is not great, but I think it'll come down further. But the other one, Tim, you had mentioned the rates. I didn't look at this. The last bit of the market, I took some time off just to enjoy life. But Yeah, you can see the rate cut probabilities. This is for May specifically, where we were before. It's actually from a month ago. It's actually lower chance of a rate cut in May, which is kind of odd. But if you look at what's probably more interesting is at the end of the year numbers, December 10th, you see actually that there used to not really be much of a consensus. There still isn't. There's a wide range, but we're looking at 4 rate cuts right now as the average there. So, and that's really shifted a lot, with even some predicting a lot more than that, which is not good. Like rate cuts in the face of recession, they're not bullish, but there's something. I don't know if Powell is going to cut though in May. Like the comments that he made yesterday and then also today as well, it seemed like that he was hesitant to cut. And they're kind of in a hard place. But I think that, like going back to the Smoot-Hawley tariffs of 1930, which really prolonged and exacerbated the Great Depression, the Fed, I mean, it was relatively new. It was formed, I think, in 1917. This was their first kind of crisis that they faced, and they were very, very slow to react. And a lot of people blame both the tariffs and also the Fed's reaction. So I don't think that we'll get both the tariffs sticking around like they are with no negotiation and the Fed completely sitting on their hands. That's almost impossible.
Yeah, I think back then the Fed didn't do anything, actually. I know for the first, as I recall, I hadn't had this course since, ancient days in college. But as I recall, in the early 20s, they had a huge bunch of tariffs, but the Fed didn't do anything at all to help because I think they thought at the time it would exacerbate the problem. But like I said, there's other issues there. But you do have the Fed, you do have the service businesses that aren't being tariffed, and you can't tariff. The guy said, "Well, why can't they tariff those?" I go, "Because people could just go move to that country." It's like when it's service business, you can actually move people around quite a bit, and. But the Fed rate, I think he should cut in May because my position on that is they're at 2.8%. Housing lags. They're probably closer to their 2% as they want, and you don't land a plane going 100 miles an hour. And but I do think that this part of this whole tariff situation, how broad it is, was like Trump saying they need rates down and they want him to reduce rates, and I think part of that is Powell's tendency to not want to go along with Trump to some extent, and he thinks he can wait because his speech even today, if you look at the actual terms of his speech, he talks about it as if yesterday didn't happen. So he actually wrote that speech before yesterday, and so his speech doesn't take into consideration the events of the last 2 days. And he also left it open to May because he said we'll watch it and see what happens. And so. Will they cut in May? It just depends on what's going on. And I can't figure, I can't figure out whether if numbers go bad, he'll cut, or if tariffs go away, he'll cut or not cut. It's like we had this kind of game in our law firm sometimes because we had confidential information about certain information that would affect the market. We couldn't actually trade on it. And we used to have a game of trying to figure out if we knew the information, what would it do to the stock? And half the time you couldn't figure it out because the market relies on stuff that you don't necessarily know.
Kelly's putting $5 towards your light bill there, Roy. So
it just got darker the moment she donated too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, I'm sure that Kelly knows a meme, but in case you guys have only been watching us for maybe like the last 6 months or so. When SoFi was under 10 for the longest time, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going dark mode, Roy. And I was honestly thinking like it was pretty unlikely that we'd see a single digit SoFi again. Here we are. So dark mode, Roy, got to save those pennies. So thank you, Kelly. I can afford to turn on the lights when that hits. Of course, Canadian $5 is like 50 cents. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you.
It's actually a shot at SoFi, the dark mode there. So he's just picking fun. No, I'm kidding. But speaking of picking fun at SoFi or a little bit of negative sentiments towards SoFi, last week we had quite the debate on SoFi versus Robinhood. Tim, you were not there on that show, but probably you should have been. What was your thoughts on some of the commentary of what we said there, and just overall, is SoFi dead to Robinhood banking?
No, and I'm going to go back to another example I had. This same conversation occurred throughout the 80s and early 90s about whether Apple would kill Microsoft or Microsoft would kill Apple. And the whole thing you'd have to remember is they had different customer bases. Microsoft was totally Office. Apple was totally creative people. And you have to understand that all people aren't the same. And so Robinhood has the people that it can get, and SoFi can have the people it can get. There'll be some overlap, but there'll be a lot of people that just don't want to trade, and they don't need Apple. Everything that Hood provides, they don't need. And the fact that it's easier to shift over, that's fine. But I think they both will survive. I mean, I own both those stocks. And people say, "Oh, you're against Hood." I'm not against Hood. I made some comments about it. Just like I made comments about SoFi, what I think they should do. I had comments on what I thought Robinhood should do. I really don't like the gambling. I mean, the event contract things for sports. I think the event contract things for others are fine. But when you get like stock market, say it's an investment where every day you can put money at play and you either win or lose, and they're taking a 2% vig, right, on each side of that bet. It only takes like between two people having the same amount of money going, it only takes like 39 bets for you to lose all your money. And the money all goes to the platform, so that's great. But you really don't want to kill your customers. It's kind of like my same theory about charging 31%, 30% interest rates, and why I think SoFi should have a lower interest rate credit card secured by your assets. Because whenever you charge 30%, and I've represented people that got into trouble just pro bono, and you tell them, I can't pay 31%. Can you lower it to 10? They go, no, and then they don't get paid back. So I think that's contrary to Robinhood, how Robinhood started, by saving people money and not taking high fees on stock transactions, is that there's more money to invest. And I think that platform gives them less money to invest. But I understand it differently than most people do, because I think it's more a hedge away from crypto. In case crypto has a crypto winter, they're using that in banking more as a hedge. If you look at the banking situation with them, not having your own banking license, and my personal opinion is they're not going to get one anytime soon, is they're dealing with the, what was the name?
Coastal Community Bank?
Yeah. Coastal Community Bank services a lot of fintechs. It's got like $400 million of capital. It does business banking through Blue Vine, right? It does, I think it does Webull, does the whole thing you have to do in running a company, especially if you're like going to restructure the company. The first thing you look at is sources of supply. And his source of supply of money is that bank. And so he's going to be restricted in how fast he grows based on the capital of that bank. And he can't put in more than 4 or 5% capital, although they just raised $100 million in December, right? So you want to own kind of your source of supply or tie it up for exclusivity, and he's not doing that, right? But I think he's trying to expand to hedge their crypto. But I think he'd be, with all the neat stuff that he has, I think he's making a mistake in not going after Schwab customers more. When his average customer is 7,000 and the average Schwab customer is 256,000, there's a big market to attack there, and he has the new tools, all those cool new tools to do that. The only problem is he has to convince the young generation to convince their parents to do it, because what's going to happen is, if he's relying on all the parents giving all this money to the baby boomers' children over the next 5 or 10 years, and that's his growth, it might not happen. Because everybody that I've ever discussed or talked to, and most of the people I know in California who have $2 million or above, or even $1.5 million, all have trusts. And the first thing you say in the trust, like in my trust, I picked the financial advisors for that trust. And I don't let my kid change that financial advisor till he's 40 or 50 years old. So once people get 40 or 50 years old, what's more appealing to you is a Schwab or a SoFi model, than a Robinhood model. You don't stay a gambler. Look, there's nobody that gambled on stock more than I did in my 20s. I didn't have any money. I was making $34,000 a year. I had something. I had like $150,000 in options that expired 2 or 3 months. But I did a lot of due diligence back then, and it was easier back then because nobody would do the due diligence. It wasn't available. You had to actually get the financial reports and know what they're said and go through them all. So I think Hood has a huge ability right now with what they're doing, and with a couple tweaks, to go after Schwab. And I'm saying, why aren't they going after Schwab? Right? Because one of the things about wealth management, there's a lot more stuff you have to do with wealth management. I talked to a friend of mine who's a CEO of a top 25 wealth management company in the United States. And the services that you have to do, you can't do for $250, right? You can do investment advisory services, right? And you can do models, and you can do model portfolios and you can ask the questions and funnel those people in and make money at $250. But all the other wealth management things, setting up trusts, setting up wills, managing their estate, managing their accounting, all this other stuff that you have to do for people that are 5 million or above, you need more heft behind that. And they could easily kind of partner with a couple big wealth management firms to provide that for a higher fee, but a lower fee than they would otherwise have. Because most wealth management firms have minimum fees of maybe 15 or 20,000 a year.
So,
but I think that's a huge market. That's a huge market, and because Schwab is horrible, right?
They just acquired Trade PMR to bring on financial advisors to their customers to try to bring on a more mature client, as well as announcing estate planning tools on the banking side. So I think that they are 100% behind your line of thinking, where they do need to work up market towards a much more mature and larger customer.
Right. Those large customers require a lot of relationship handholding, though. You're not going to do it totally AI. I mean, some people you might, once you get started, you might. See, because once you get started, it kind of runs itself a little bit. But for the first 2 or 3 years, people want to be involved in it. And people with a lot of money have, Wells Fargo right now, their wealth management division is having serious problems, right? And that's the backbone of some of their financial prowess, actually. They cut like 50%, 60% of their wealth management people, and they're trying to move wealth management overseas. And the clients went absolutely bonkers on them, right? They said, where's my person that's going to come run errands for me? I mean, they do all kinds of stuff when you're in wealth management that you have to do. It's like, especially, where are you going to get the tax advice, right? And the tax advice, the trust advice, you got to set up separate entities. There's all kinds of things you have to do for a high value client that needs daily or weekly or monthly, especially in the first 2 or 3 year setup stage. And like right now in wealth management, you're on the phone to clients like 20 hours a day. But I think they are moving in the right direction. I believe they are moving in the right direction. I just don't like the sports event contracts because I think it hurts their brand. It doesn't hurt their brand for young people, but to get the Schwab people, that hurts their brand, right? And that, like I said, though, they'll have it's not a zero-sum game. SoFi is going after, I, as a young guy, would really do Robinhood. I, as myself now, can do SoFi. I have everything set up, all those assets. I buy some stock. Would you like to have level 1 options? Yeah, you don't really need them. But you do actually need certain types of option contracts for really wealthy people when they're in this kind of a market environment. They really want collars and stuff like that. But I think that the idea of it's Robinhood going after SoFi is a little bit of a fishbowl, right? It looks at all the fishbowl people who like Robinhood or like SoFi, but it doesn't look at the entire market. I mean, you're going to get a SoFi, if they did stuff right, they'd get these students in with student loans. They give them a credit card, they start them on that, and those people don't have any money to invest in Robinhood, right? So they're not going to Robinhood. And then later on, some of them may switch over, some of them may not. But you have a lot of people, like I know my son's friends who are 28 to 32. There's like 10 or 15% of them have Robinhood accounts. Other people have Schwab accounts, and they just don't want to. They don't like the market. They don't. It doesn't interest them. It's like give me a index fund, and that's fine for me. So they're both going to be successful. It's kind of like I said. It's kind of like the battle between Apple and Microsoft. I literally was for hours telling people that Apple wasn't going to have any inroads in the office because I didn't want to switch over because I liked Microsoft, and they were trying to convince me otherwise. And then later on, I was trying to convince other people that Apple was better for the office than Microsoft, and they had to change. But there's a lot of market there. I mean, look at how much market of the overall brokerage market, like the traditional Schwab brokerage market that Robinhood has. I think it's only like 10% or less than 10%.
But
And
so, I mean, look, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. It's not a zero-sum game. There's more than enough market to go around. They're both going to grow. And there's limitations that Robinhood naturally can't get into that the banking charter allows for SoFi. Like, I get all of that. My wider point that I'd love to hear your thoughts on is the trend here. And if, in your opinion, it gets to a point where it's actually, more concerning for SoFi. And it might not ever cross that threshold because they're not going to get a bank charter and they're not going to ever be like a one-to-one, competitor with SoFi as a result of that, because they always have to go through a third party. But last year it was limited to credit cards, which is a very small business line. This year it's limited, to credit cards and checking and savings. Next year it might be something else entirely. And so the trend is the main point that I was making in that last video, to say like, okay, well, if they're getting a new product line that can compete one-to-one with SoFi every single year, then at what point do we start to be more concerned?
Right.
well, yeah, that's a good point. Let me give you 2 points and two responses to that. Once it hasn't happened, and they're going to need a lot more capital. Like if they went into business banking, I love Steve. I think Steve is one of your best guests. He has a lot of great ideas, but his concept of how easy it is to start business banking is not correct. And the wealth management, I just explained that. It's a lot harder to do. I would look for like SoFi. My guess is that SoFi and Robinhood on the wealth management front. I'd like to see who gets to the point where they actually get some kind of agreement or partnership with a real wealth manager for people who actually exceed, go to 500 million and don't want $250 service. But the trends, trends are trends. But let's just talk about some trends. Here's a couple trends. The Sony Betamax was like 100 times better than VHS, but they had a different customer base. All right, and that happened. And VHS and VHS just went more broad and global, and so it's a different type of customer base. Robinhood, I think, has all they need to really do things, but they're going to be, you always talk about capital constraints, like how they said SoFi was capital constrained. Robinhood is going to be banking constrained, right? Let's just ask this question: 3.2 million gold members and 100,000 cards. Now we're going to 200,000 cards. That's 3 million of your customers that don't have those cards. For how long? How long are they going to stay if they don't get a card, right? And so the biggest mistake you can make in business is seeing your demand and not fulfilling your demand, and then going down another path. Now they have the benefit because they can go down simultaneous paths because number one, they have capital, and number two, they have really creative engineers, so they can do that. But for me to understand, if I want to buy more, I was going to buy like $250,000 of Robinhood, and when I saw the sports event thing, I said, nope, I'm not going to do it. And then when I saw if they would compete with Schwab more in the nature that I think they should, I would have probably still made that investment. But I still think they're a good company. They're going to make a lot of money in the sports event contracts. Don't get me wrong; they're going to make a lot of money. The stock's going to go up because of it, right? But it's how much does their brand affected? How much is their brand affected if they have another person that commits a suicide because they took all their investment money and they put it in sports events. How is this current market volatility affecting the investments they have in assets under management? When, like, I was an example, like I told you, in 87, when I lost money, I dropped out of investing for 3 years. I just dropped. It was too stressful.
A couple comments really quick. So one, there's 3.2 million gold subscribers right now. Not all of them are on the wait list for the credit card. I think about 2 point something million of them are waiting.
Okay.
In terms of how many are going to stay over the next year, if you were to look at it like almost like net dollar retention, but net gold retention, it'll be over 100%. Like gold subscribers are going to grow faster than what they're waiting for the gold card, because it's not just a subscription for the gold card, in my opinion. This is my opinion, by the way, all of it.
Right.
But it's also for all of the other benefits, right? So they're going to stay for the other benefits while they're waiting.
Right. But how long does that one person, I mean, you kind of try not to piss off your customers. I mean, the customer's always right is that motto. I just think that they need to figure out a way to roll it out faster or explain it. I mean, if this was Noto doing this, people would be all over him. Like, why, they're all over him anyway, but they'd be all over him going, well, wait a minute. You only gave 100,000 cards. You got 3.2 million people, 2.2 million want the card, and, you got to move faster. And I think his point in that tweet would be the same point that Vlad would make in his tweet is, look, we're working through it and figuring it out. We're going to figure it out. And so you can't really, I can't really complain about either's position on it. I think I pretty much know what Vlad's doing. They're trying to make sure they get it right so they don't lose money on their credit card, because you're going to lose a lot of money in credit cards. For the same reason Noto's not issuing a premium card yet. He's even more conservative, so he's not going to issue one until he figures out how to get it right.
There's some news on that today, though.
Really? What was it?
The credit limit increases. It was like I saw maybe 10 posts, 12 posts saying their credit limits got doubled or 2.5x or all.
Yeah, mine increased.
Yeah, so maybe they're ramping that now. Sofi is.
Yeah, but they don't have the premium card. They're working on their 2 cards, which in my analysis was a beginner card and a medium card, and we don't know what those look like yet. So I'm not going to say that I'm right or they're right or wrong. It's just my opinion, right, of what I think they should do. And we've discussed that before. But they got to have a premium card, and that premium card has to have a little bit better rewards. And maybe they need to tie that with their interest only product, right? So your premium card now, instead of Robinhood gives other benefits, you can give them the interest only benefit, and you get them a little bit lower rate. Right. And you can tie that in with your invest account, so you can deduct that interest as investment interest. I mean, I run a little bit of margins to create some investment expense to offset some of my investment interest. And so since I'm offsetting it at my tax rate in California, even the 9 to 10% margin, it drops to 5%, and then I'm making investments more than 5%. So I just do that to offset for my offsetting tax liability. But they're going to have a premium card at some point. They just want to make sure they get it right. Robinhood has a premium card, although I criticize it that they haven't issued it, I understand why they did, and it's probably the right thing to do, because you've got to get it right. You try the 100,000, that worked. They're making money on those. They try the next 100,000. They're doing a little bit of underwriting on all this stuff, figuring out who is it. You can't, just because you sign up for Robinhood doesn't mean you're going to fulfill the requirements for their card. Right? Just like the same thing if Noto has a premium card, not everybody's going to get it. Yeah.
One note on the card as well: you do not have to be a gold member to join the wait list. So people that are waiting, I myself actually joined before I was a gold member. I had not moved my. I think I'd actually just moved my
only a couple million over at Robinhood at the time. Then he brought over his other millions. Now he's fully over.
Yeah. Can you guys explain something to me? Why is there still 2.7 million on the wait list? Is that a limitation of their partner bank?
No. It's just they don't want to rush into credit, and if it's wrong, if they get the underwriting wrong, that they just go bankrupt on them getting into credit on a product that they don't understand.
Yeah. So SoFi is case in point as far as like what can go wrong. Like
exactly.
That was really negative for SoFi. and they weren't playing with 3% cash back, which is far more dangerous. So if it goes wrong, it can go really, really wrong. And at this stage, it wouldn't like kill Robinhood, but it would cause a lot of pain, and not just financial pain either. So they had to be very careful to make sure.
I wouldn't overlook what Tevis said though, because I think they're still doing that card through Coastal Bank. And if you look what Coastal Bank does, is they're selling credit card debt hand over fist. So, and they have credit cards for all those other aforementioned companies. The problem is can Coastal grow? I mean, I thought it was a great play. I don't know which one of you guys said it. It's like, yeah, just buy Coastal, right? You know, buy Coastal Community Bank, its parent company. But you know, they had to restate their financial statements. I don't think it was a huge deal, but Robinhood is restricted by the capital and what their partner can do, right? And so the typical thing you would do in that situation is you'd have another partner lined up, which I'm sure they do. Actually, I'm sure they have a secondary partner lined up if they need it.
Probably,
yeah. I'm not sure about
some of their products. They typically, for instance, the FDIC insurance, they have like 8 or 12 partner banks lined up. So, but they also have an agreement with Coastal too. You can look at the 10K where I think that they have to buy some of that credit card debt as well themselves. Robinhood, rather.
Yeah.
So,
because if you look at like SoFi is what, almost 10 times bigger than Coastal, right? As a bank. So
yeah, but I don't know how that affects some of the growth of those cards. Like if I look at other fintechs that have partnered and have credit, like that hasn't slowed down, you know, Affirm or any of these other fintechs that don't have banking charters.
Yeah, but their bank, the Coastal Bank, if they're carrying credit card debt, it affects their ratios. And so they sell it all. So them having to sell the credit card debt, would you rather be selling personal loan debt or credit card debt? I mean, you know, who knows? I mean, I would bet you that Robinhood Gold Card, the 100,000 people that have Robinhood Gold cards are probably really good credit risks.
200,000 now.
Now 200,000. Well, they're not out yet.
One question I have is like, all right, well, when it was the credit card that they rolled out, like I could understand the Coastal move where it's a very small bank, but now that they're expanding into checking and savings, and I mean, who knows where else they want to expand into the banking side of things? Like, why wouldn't they just partner with a larger bank that can have allow them more flexibility to scale faster?
Honestly, my interpretation of that is that you need a bank that's under $10 billion in assets in order to get a favorable rate for interchange.
Yeah.
But like,
for your debit card
of like growing faster versus the rate benefits for interchange? Is it worth it them holding back their growth to get that interchange rate on that small amount?
I didn't know that it does hold back. That's something that I'll ask Vlad about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even SoFi, as I recall, even SoFi was doing something with Galileo where they were working with smaller banks to get that interchange too. That's important. Right. But you know, you get around that, not to beat a dead horse, but you get around that by having a credit card that acts as a debit card, which I've said for a year and a half. And you know, somebody's going to do it. If SoFi doesn't do it, maybe Robinhood would do it because that's kind of, you get way more interchange and you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. But that's what, and I remember Galileo was saying that when they partnered with Wyndham, that I think they used a bank that was under 10 billion so they could actually, because I was saying how much that's not a lot of interchange revenue to share with Wyndham, but then I found out that they did it through a bank where they can get that's under 10 billion, so they get the higher interchange.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, you're just running money through as long as the bank doesn't grow over 10 billion. And then you can always say, well, that bank will grow with them. And that's a legitimate argument too, that the bank can grow with them, right? Because they can have more profits. But, you know, doesn't Robinhood want to, you know, that's always a constant battle then, because that bank grows and they get more and more partners and the deals with all their partners get basically dwindled down a little bit, right? You know, they're going to want more as they get to capacity. You know, it's just like a hotel room. You know, all the hotel rooms are stayed. There's 4 left. Those are going to cost you a lot more than the prior renters.
in terms of the event contracts commentary, because I actually am even getting more favorable on event contracts. I just saw Interactive Brokers just rolled it out to more countries, including Canada. Webull is now rolling it out. I think that you're going to see companies like Schwab start to bring out event contracts. It's going like almost the way that a lot of brokerages, whenever crypto started pouring out, that was a detrimental add to their, the I guess perspective of their business, that it'll become very normal, if not weird, if you don't have access to multiple new asset classes. So I think that event contracts will be looked at as an asset class soon.
Right, but the legality is going to be up in the air. I mean, did a detailed post on this, which is like, it's like 50-50. It's like, it's like, who knows, but the people that, they're on the board of Calci are actually, Donald Trump's kids on the board of Calci. And so the CDC, the CFTC it'll have an interesting decision to make on this stuff. But I don't mind the event contracts. I just don't like the sports event contracts. But because like when you get into that, everybody's going to get into it. I know now that ESPN is almost on the verge of getting into it. BetMGM is going to get into it, and they're going to be offering. BetMGM is going to be offering like, the same thing they do when you bet at their sites is you get kind of like points and stuff like that. And so it's going to be a lot more competitive. It's going to drive down that, and it's going to be spread wildly over everybody. And so if you're like Calci paying for all this fight to make it legal, you're just incurring that expense for everybody else. And it'll be spread everywhere. I mean, and then even Vegas, but Vegas is not going to die on this without a fight. They make so much money in sports betting. But
I should say I definitely misspoke whenever I said asset class. More investment vehicle or something like this. It's definitely not an asset, but
definitely not an investment either.
Well,
right? You're going to invest in what?
A trading instrument.
Yeah, a trading instrument.
But yeah. Anyway, I think the fact that Kalshi is front running this, I actually don't think it's too bad. Like, what's the alternative? They're, working 9 to 5, making $100,000. So, no. I don't know. I think it's a good venture for them to do, and they are trailblazing it for the rest of the industry to then, who knows, maybe sweep them away. But
I don't know how it, if they're ultimately successful and nobody else gets into it, how does it affect your brand to have sports contracts? I think that's a risk, but because I'm older than you guys, and I used to gamble. I used to go to Vegas and throw $10,000 on games, right? And I've lost some, I've won some, but over the years, I probably lost a little bit, and I just stopped doing it because I said, this is just your risk aversion goes when you get older, and you have kids and stuff like that. It depends on how much people use it, and I will tell you what I would do if I was advising Robinhood. I'd say put some kind of asset minimum that you had to have to do them. Because if you had an asset minimum, even as low as $10,000, you're going to get rid of a lot of the problem. People will just come to the site, sign up. Age 18 can get a contract, but then they have to be approved. I don't know what their approval. I don't know if they have any restrictions on approval, but making them have like at least $10,000 would probably eliminate 90% of the problems that I view that they would have with them.
Tevis would definitely use it if it got UFC contracts for sure. You could bet on the cards.
Yeah, I would love to try it if because it's different than the odds that different books give you, right? Like DraftKings or whatnot.
Yeah, but Tevis, you can just go to Vegas, and since you never lose, you'll never have to pay the VIG with Vegas.
Well, yes, sure.
But here's the interesting part. Imagine watching a fight, Tevis, and this goes across any sport, but you can trade in and out at any point. So the rate or like the odds will change. So
I already do that. It's called live betting, Tanner.
But, okay, live betting. Sure. I'm really not a gambler. But that does make the outcome no longer 50-50. Like
Yeah, but
You now have sentiment.
the reason why I like UFC is that it can end before the decision. Because if it goes to decision, then a lot of them are just split decisions that like will totally fuck up your bets.
Well, you're using the
that's where
word
it's
decision weirdly. Like,
up to judges.
yeah,
Well, Tanner, you actually make a good point, and this hasn't been discussed, but from a legal perspective, the fact that on those contracts, one of the restrictions is a game, it's a win-loss in the game, and they haven't made this argument yet, that they're going to make, Kelsey's probably going to make this argument that because you can get in and out during the game or before the game ends, that it's really not just on the game.
right.
The
right.
outcome
The
of your
sentiment.
investment is not based just on the game. It's not, you go to Vegas, you pull a ticket, you bet on the Rams, you're done. You watch the game, you win or lose. That's the win or lose on the game, right?
I don't know
And
because they have event contracts on binary events that are not related to sports, like politics and current events.
Yeah, still on sentiment.
Yeah, but the sports betting is more controlled by the Gambling Act and stuff. The events aren't. So you can easily see how events should be legal, because there's nothing restricting that.
I watched Chris Patel bet on, and I could be butchering this. My recollection of this was that he was trading election contracts and betting on Kamala to win, and then had dumped those whenever he was green on it, way before the contracts were to expire. Obviously, we know now, she didn't win, but he made money.
Yeah. For sports, that's a great argument that nobody's made yet, and I'm sure they'll make it eventually.
It's interesting for sure.
Yeah, I was actually tempted to dabble in events contracts for the first time. I'm not, but just because I saw you can bet on the May Fed funds meeting and the outcome for that. 2 different events contracts signed up for that, but I was just like, man, the probabilities on one of these it doesn't seem to match what I think should be a probability. I don't think it's likely that they'll cut, but it's like very, very unlikely. I'm like, so my thought was, and I'm not doing this, and I'm not saying anybody should do this, but I was tempted to just do the same thing as a Chris Patel, where it's like, okay, this is priced absurdly low. Let me get in. When I'm green a little bit, I'll just take those gains. I'm not doing it though. But yeah, the sports stuff I'm not touching.
That actually happened in the last day, right? I think it was 19% and 80%, and then it's now 24% and 79%. So you could have made like 5% overnight doing that. Exactly what you just said.
You guys want a little breaking news? I was going to save it for my video this weekend, but I'll share with you guys. I got an email, or I got a DM from a customer of Robinhood that shared that he was part of a survey. And this was the survey that they had asked him for event contracts. Outside of sports, what type of event contracts are you interested in trading in the future? So they are probing, what would you like? Do you want Fed fund rates, job numbers, ag prices, inflation, spending, all this stuff, climate events, entertainment events, financial events, political events, company events is my favorite. Tesla quarterly deliveries, Coinbase quarterly volume, company earnings. That I would love to bet on. I would love to bet on, delivery numbers, and then also seeing not just about winning, but seeing what sentiment looks like versus Wall Street's numbers for deliveries and everything like this. I do take Vlad at face value whenever he says that there is some level of source of truth with event contracts, because you're betting your real money. You can't lie. Like the contract numbers is what the market is telling you.
Yeah, I still even on event contracts, they're taking 2% on each side. So 2% of your stuff. How many of these do you want to do? Because you're not going to be 80%, 70% winner, right? So eventually it's like sitting down, and we're 4 sitting down playing poker, and the rake's $3 a hand. And no matter how much money you have in like 300 hands, the house has it all. Right. So if some people want to do that here and there, what happens is you're going to lose customers because they're going to lose their money. And then you got to keep getting new customers. So what you have to do to get new customers is you got to expand your market. You keep expanding your market. I'll tell you an interesting thing. I represented a small casino card club. Well, it's not small card club, but a small casino. And it had an IRS audit. And this was a real interesting thing we found, because they had cash going to the games, and this really is an audit about the $10,000 rule for cash. And they, so what would you think if you're sitting down at a table and you're using chips? What would create bigger pots, the chips or the cash?
Chips.
Completely wrong.
Was it the cash? Because the chips run out and they just come in with.
No, you would think it was chips. I always thought it was chips, but we had this a month. We watched these tables and they let them use as much cash because they wanted to figure out what was going on. Because the casino argument was like, no, it'll hurt our business. We'll pay less federal tax, and we should have these faster ways to do the $10,000 cash thing. We sat down there and watched for hours. As soon as somebody throws cash on the table, people realize it's cash. And the betting goes crazy, like 4x or 5x, because people see the cash and they want it. It's not the concept you think that chips isn't money, so they'll throw more chips in. When they see cash, they go after that cash, right? It's a very interesting dynamic. And my point is when you're on these sites and you see, I just won the dollars and the dollar signs pop up, it's like seeing cash. It's going to be kind of addictive, right? It's almost addictive to me because I was like, how do I get my debit card in the Cal sheet because I want to bet on the Fed? And I said, that 5-to-1's not a bad bet. And I thought, Powell's never going to come through. So then I said, it was 80, 20, make 25% in a week. Maybe I'll do that. And you're like, but I'm like going, wait, hold on. I've been through this, but the sport, I think that those events are less problematic than sporting events, because sporting events, what a gambler gets is, and this shows you with that cash, my cash example, what a gambler gets gamblers they like to win money. They don't want to lose money, but they're not in it to win money. If you do any studies on this or read any studies about it, they're in for the rush on the possibility of winning money. Their heart rates go up higher and higher right when the roulette ball is spinning. When it hits, it drops. Win or lose, it drops. So you can watch sporting events real time with your ear and place these bets, and then halftime and this, and you're just clicking through, and it's not real money, but you're seeing cash, and it's kind of the worst of the chips cash situation, because do you really want them spending all that money on it? But they're going to make it. Whoever does it, I mean, like Kalshi or whoever does it, they're going to make a fortune. The question is when you have an investment, when you're actually having a business that's an investment business, how many people are going to pull money out of their investments now to do that? I mean, I think the minimum is the way to handle it. I think really having a minimum on it it's going to decrease people on your platform, but it's going to decrease the people that are on your platform. That's going to hurt you if they lose all their money.
So I just think it's interesting that no one has a problem that any of these brokerages allow Tevis here to buy TSLL and then write, leaps on TSLL. That is, in my opinion, so much worse than an event contract. But no one has a problem that Robinhood or Schwab or any of these companies will let them do that.
It's harder to understand and more complex for people to understand how they can win or lose. The simple concept of, hey, Duke is going to win or lose versus options that have, all the Greek letters associated with, you don't understand, and what's the theta decay and what's this and what's that, and it's related to a business. And it's a proper way of hedging. I mean, they argued in these cases that like the election contracts are a way to hedge. And now they're arguing that the sports contracts are a way to hedge. What are they hedging with a sports contract?
No, the sports contracts are not a way to hedge, but the Fed funds rate is a way to hedge.
Yes, of course. I mean, even arguably 100%, the election's a way to hedge.
Yeah. Or if they bring on those delivery numbers or something like that, those are all ways to hedge.
I mean, like, I'm sure that there's a few other things like that, but that would actually get a lot of traction. I think people love to speculate, and I mean, honestly, bet too.
Yeah, I would love to own that business. I'd love to own Kalshi.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tim. You can finish.
No, I said I'd love to own Kalshi. I think my father-in-law had some money, and when I just getting married to his daughter, he had the opportunity to put $100,000 into a riverboat casino when they just started. And I said, "Yo, you got to do it." And he's like morally against it. He goes, you know what? I'm morally against it for religious reasons. I go, you don't even go to church that often. You're going to make millions of dollars. The people that put $100,000 make like $20 million. Right? It's like, so I'm not morally against it about what they're doing. I think it's a great business. I just, I don't like to funnel, you don't want to kill your customers. I mean, that's kind of the concept of anything, right? I mean, even MLMs know this. Don't drag all the money out of the customer the first meeting, right? And so, but if you think there's a crypto winner and you have like, what last 50% of their 70, 60% of their revenue was crypto. If you think you're going to get hit on crypto and and you're waiting to get all your gold cards issued and your thing, it's probably a good intermediate play.
Yeah, it's not that. I think it's like 30 something % is crypto.
Well, in fourth quarter was a lot higher.
No,
Well,
that was the fourth quarter.
Of transactional
30.
revenue, it was high, but they also have net interest revenue as well.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually it's closer to 20%. That was just a bumper quarter. So.
Oh, year round, you mean?
Yeah. It's continuing to go down. So it wouldn't shock me like if we don't have like a crypto winter or anything like that. I think that we will this year, just based on the trajectory. I think it's going to get to like about 12 to 15%, which is a good place to be. Actually, they have a lot of legs of that business that are growing pretty rapidly, faster. Well, not faster than crypto, but faster than crypto, like year over year, where I think it's going. So.
What's going to be interesting is if the sports and event contracts expand to everybody, how they market against each other, right? So what kind of, where I think Robinhood may have an advantage is how to make it gamified, right? Just like when you play games, there's slot machine. I mean, the new slot machines are really more popular than the old slot machines because people have like gamified them now. And they're just not like, do you win money or is it bar? It's like little games and stuff like that. The question is how they compete, based on the app or based on their graphics. That's going to be really interesting to me. Of like who does what kind of graphics if they're held to be legal.
What's crazy is I went to Vegas recently and just went to all the hotels to see all the different casinos and everything, and they're absolutely beautiful, but the actual machines are identical across the board. Contrast is turned up to like 200%. It's this super weird, like just copy paste everywhere you go. Like you can even just gamble in the airport. Like what a crazy city that is. But
so one thing that Tim's remarks on the events contracts, well, and Tanner, yours as well, reminded me of Vlad talking about the source of truth thing. The source of truth argument doesn't really justify or not justify the events contracts like legally or morally, but there is one thing that I really like about it is that if they do something like Tesla deliveries and earnings and those sort of things, like the wisdom of the crowd tends to actually perform really quite well. So it feels like it's an extra layer of advantage, even if I'm not dabbling in that stuff at all, which I don't mind the non-sports events contracts at all. But just having that source of information, it's like me having access to the Robinhood 24-hour markets when a lot of other people don't. It's like it's an extra advantage, extra data point. I can do something and act on it if I want to, or I can use that just to inform my strategy for that day. And so I'm very curious, if they do roll out like Tesla deliveries or earnings related contracts, like if the wisdom of the crowd continues to outperform, it's like, man, I may not actually bet on that, but as a source of data, I'll be like, oh man, yes. Help me know what I should do into earnings for this or into deliveries for this.
It also gives you an opportunity to hedge or in a lot of specific instances with regard to upcoming events. But you're also going to have like in the sports contracts, you're also going to have all the really, really good sports bettors playing the sides of, they're really, really good. I mean, what I've learned over the years about gambling on sports is that the people in Vegas that sets the lines are really, really good. I mean, if you ever sit through bet in a basketball game, how many times do you win before the last minute, right? Or the over and unders are like a point or 2 points off. Those guys will arbitrage the hell out of this.
So
they're going to arbitrage.
I'm glad you brought that up because like there will be arbitrage opportunities for real stocks the more these markets are created. Because even right now, as we head into like delivery number days, people have an estimation, but if they can quantify that with enough volume, then the underlying stock is going to trade in anticipation of what Polymarket is saying, for example, for delivery numbers. I'm even seeing it right now, like in sports betting. Like I bet on the UFC like pretty much every Saturday, and I look at the lines on DraftKings versus FanDuel, and they're very similar. But then I look at the lines on Polymarket, and you have real discrepancies there in terms of the lines, in terms of what people are thinking versus what the house put as their rate of return. And there are arbitrage opportunities. And I just think that the more markets are created, as you get volume in those markets, you're going to be able to play the event contracts against the actual stock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's exactly. I mean,
But that-
arbitrage all the people that do it, find out. This happens in Vegas, but rarely. You will bet on a game and the line will move substantially, then you'll bet the other way and you're guaranteed either a tie or money. But in the arbitrage of these, with all these sites having different people, having different things who aren't with perfect knowledge or perfect abilities, that somebody's going to have a software. This is what Robinhood should do. They should have a software program that gathers all those things and shows you everything, and you can make that transaction on any platform.
Well, not only that, but like it opens a door for manipulation so heavily, because somebody with a platform like Amit or Evan Stock Market News, or one of the guys like Sawyer, for example, who always tweets about Tesla, like that person who has hundreds of thousands of followers on X, they can buy a position, they can tweet their thought, it'll go viral, that position will increase a couple of cents, and you just cash out. And it's like, good luck catching that, because they're just tweeting their opinion.
Yeah, I think that might be illegal.
Well, the markets are not liquid enough to not react to something like that.
Right. So, but that's the problem with being regulated by the CFTC, though. You have these other rules where you're, gambling, you could do that. I mean, you could just go to a different gamble place and do that, and whatever happens. It's harder to do in Vegas because all the sports books are indirectly connected. Like Harry's or whatever owns like 50% of the market. There's somebody who owns 20%. There's like only 2 or 3 of them that all the hotel sports books are connected to. But it's gonna be interesting. I mean, I love just I have an opinion on everything, but I love to watch everything, even if it goes contrary to my opinion, because it's such an interesting development, right? I mean, the opportunities for arbitrage, not only against site, but even arbitrage in your position to some extent for a day or so, right?
Doesn't that get you excited to own a platform that offers a new trading thing like this for people to find these arbitrage opportunities and stuff? Because doesn't that mean that you're going to see a large uptick of new users that are coming to Robinhood that have been potentially spreading their trades between Kalshi and Polymarket, that now they're going to do all three?
Yeah, of course it does. Except for my main problem with the site for Robinhood is and same thing with betting is eventually all gamblers lose all their money. Eventually, very few people who gamble on a regular basis have any money. There's like
Vegas seems to be doing fine.
Who?
Vegas.
Well, yeah, they're the house.
So is Robinhood.
No, I know, but their customers aren't.
I know.
Problem, you're bleeding money off of your customers, and you're bleeding with an addiction. That's why I said you're going to have a problem with that, but you get over a lot of the problems if you just set a minimum asset amount or some restrictions on who can do it. Because if I lose my money, nobody's going to give a shit, right? Now I go on Robinhood and say I lost like $10,000 or $20,000. Nobody's going to care. You get some kid that takes his dad's money, opens up an account, and then starts betting on sports on those contracts. That's bad for your brand of investments.
Well, I saw Tevis. We went to a basketball game together, and he's live betting the whole time, losing every single one of his trades, by the way. I felt so bad for him, but
that's why he has to have his channel to satisfy his betting needs.
Exactly. Guys, please fucking donate so you can fund my lifestyle.
He really does just throw it all at these sites. When he says he's using your donation money for live betting, he means it.
Like I said, though, don't get me wrong. I think Robinhood has a good business. I just don't think there's a huge overlap with SoFi's. And I think even as they both grow, they're each of like the banking business. Look at how small they are. There is so much room for growth for both of them. They could exist. I even said a thing. I said, if they had more similar cultures, and I was against this, but more similar cultures, combining them would be a great idea.
Well,
Never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. But if you could pick one that is going to grow faster than the other, and that's, I think, what everyone's getting. Obviously, I think we all think that SoFi is going to continue to grow, but are they going to be hampered in their growth?
I think SoFi has. I think what you said earlier in your several times, and what maybe Tevis and Roy said too, is I'm more risk averse. There is it's more likely Robinhood runs into an issue that hurts them than SoFi runs into an issue that hurts them, and so I own both, so I wouldn't pick just one. I mean, that's a hypothetical. It's like, all right, you want to pick NVIDIA or Palantir, right? You could say they're not really direct competitors, but in AI, is Palantir going to come up with some great AI that's going to outwork some of the NVIDIA chips? No need for the NVIDIA chips, or somebody else going to come up with something? And I'm just, I just go back to the argument with Apple people and Microsoft people. If you think the hood people arguing with the SoFi people on X is bad, you had to be there in the late 80s when people were arguing about that. It was like people wouldn't talk to each other anymore. And it's and they both had very similar audiences, but very different. And like Lotus 1, 2, 3. Do you guys know what Lotus 1, 2, 3 is?
No.
All right.
Lotus,
so do you guys use Excel?
Yeah.
Lotus 1, 2, 3 came out before Excel. It was way better than Excel. Even in its original design, it was way better Excel for like 10 or 15 years, but they didn't market it right. And they had certain risks, and Microsoft stole that. But I learned Lotus 1, 2, 3. I had to learn it, and I learned it. And when I went to Excel, I thought, what is this chintzy piece of stuff? But then people argued about that. But then what they do is you make it better, you make it better. And I think Noto's the kind of guy like how Microsoft was with Excel. He wants to make it better and better and better. And Vlad wants to make it better faster, right? So they're both want to make it better faster. So they're not going to fall into the Lotus Excel thing, because they've all learned from that stuff, right? And so, but the question is fast growth better than slow growth based on your customer base, right? You always got to think of what your customer base is. And where I disagree with most people, and they can disagree with me, I might be wrong. I think they have a different customer base. Because if you sat around and talked to everybody your age, who you're usually your friends that have similar interests, but if you go to college and talk about people that go, do you want to bet on sports? 90% of the women will say no, right? And some people won't have any interest. My other son, I can't get him interested in any kind of investment. He goes, I just don't want to be bothered with it. Just put all my money in index funds, and I'll look at it later. And he's, because he's got quite a bit of money, but he doesn't want to look at it. He doesn't want to deal with it. So there's people in both things. I mean, if you're like going, all the high earner people want to go on Robinhood because it's so cool. That's kind of the Steve Jobs aspect, the coolness. You kind of have like Vlad has kind of hooked on to the Steve Jobs cool. But here's another thing. The difference between those two is Steve Jobs never released anything early, never talked about it, wouldn't talk to you about it. And I met him one time, and he acknowledged me like, and then walked away. I thought, they go, you want to meet Steve Jobs? I go, sure. He goes, hi, Steve, this is Tim. He's the lawyer, And he goes, walked away. He didn't want to ever talk. From people I know that actually represented Apple, everybody had to sign an NDA for everything. Like he wouldn't say anything. He's more like Noto not talking, but Vlad's more of getting the user experience to be cool, right? And so you're going to get a lot of people that like user experiences being cool. And so I think that's a good company to follow. but it doesn't make SoFi a bad company to follow because they have, you guys went to high school, right? So when you went to high school, was there groups over here and groups over here that just didn't talk? They all have money. They all have different interests. It's like to think that your market is limited to the 1 or 2% market that of overall banking and brokerage that they combined have together is missing the big picture of where the money is.
So hold on. Actually, before you answer that, Tanner, I can't believe we went an hour and 20 minutes and Tim had to mention Steve Jobs not talking like Noto for me to be reminded of the biggest news possibly this week with Noto's longest tweet possibly ever.
Did we not cover that this week?
No, we didn't cover that at all. Like this is
you guys covered that last week.
You're too busy talking about Robinhood, you fucking shill.
We covered it on Bootleg Weekly, but yeah, this is.
Yeah, we covered it on the Robinhood Weekly as well, I think.
Yeah.
Tim,
I'll give you my take on it since I didn't give you my take. I think he's sticking up for his team like any good leader would. And people are calm. They'll call people they know. People like, I'm sure you guys get calls from somebody. I work at SoFi and don't tell them. I mean, people work and they're like, they go to him and they say, what's going on? Our stock and this and that. And he goes, quit fucking with my people. Basically, I think he's number one, sticking up for his people. Number two, he's sticking up for himself. And I'll tell you, if you ever do any work with millionaires or billionaires or really, really successful people, and especially ex-Goldman people, they don't like to take any crap. They just don't, because they feel that they've earned their position. It's like I said to somebody the other day, was talking about this very issue. I said, go try to get a job at Goldman. If you think you know more than Noto, go try to get a job at Goldman. Then try to become a partner in 3 years, because in 4 years or whatever it took Noto, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
All right. To think that he's not a smart guy is basically underestimating him all you want. These Goldman guys are super smart. And I don't say that about private equity guys because they're not all, but some of them are. Some of the private equity guys came from Goldman. Those guys are even smarter. But some of the people that just start into private equity, they're not as smart. But you won't find a ex-Goldman partner who isn't really smart. You won't.
Yeah,
don't underestimate them.
You're bringing back some knowledge. I think you got partner in 4 years, which was like close to being some record. And then he was one of only 3 analysts that became partner out of the 99 partners during that round.
Yeah, that's not necessarily those numbers. The 4 years is a number that is almost never achieved by Goldman, Morgan Stanley, or anybody. It's 4 years. Like when I was a third year associate, a friend of mine went to Morgan Stanley. He says, you come over to Morgan Stanley, we're talking about this. And he goes, oh, you're real smart. You'll make it in 9 years or 8 years. 4 years never happens. So if he makes it in 4 years and the Goldman people are really smart, underestimate him all you want. And that's what he's basically saying. You think when he says that thing, you think I'm a guy that knows what needs to be done and won't get it done? What he's telling you is, don't underestimate me. And that's why Fresh Horses is don't underestimate me. We're going to work as hard as we need to do. And I'll tell you, nobody outworks Goldman partners. None. Associates work harder, but the Goldman partners earned everything they did because it's a very difficult job, very time consuming. I'll give you an example of some investment banks, Morgan Stanley, that they used to give their associates that were really up for partner. They had this perk that if you stayed all night and worked all night, you go to Brook Brothers the next day and get a new shirt and tie because you need to wear a clean shirt. And a friend of mine who did that went to Morgan Stanley, and they do this at Goldman too. After 1 year, he had 257 shirts. He worked all night almost every day, up in his office. Became partner, worth a couple $100 million. It's a big prize. When people sit there just think you're Noto of all you accomplished, and there's somebody on Twitter who's like doing whatever and says, yeah, I don't think he knows what he's doing. He's like, give me a break. Really?
I don't believe any of that. Like, I mean, obviously we know that Noto is very smart and definitely has a founder's mindset whenever he looks at this company. And like the thing is, I just think that some people think that maybe some of the problems that they have are out of their control because they do have a regulation problem being a regulated bank.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
Going
people
up
don't.
against Robinhood with more flexibility is just a hard challenge.
Right. It's a winner for Robinhood and it's a loser for SoFi, but the other way is a winner and loser, right? So who wins in the end? Person has a banking license who moves slower because he has to deal with the regulation, which I've said, to you guys a lot on our private chat a lot. There's a lot of stuff. I had a response to DDI on this. I go, these are all the things that you have to do when you're a bank to be able to say anything. And you have a culture of a person who doesn't want to say stuff, right? And then you have Vlad, who is really out there in a positive way as a marketing genius, right? And he's going to market his stuff, and he can get away with saying a ton of more stuff that they can't. So you can't really compare them. But Vlad doesn't have a banking license. Vlad can be effectively capital constrained by his partners, right? Like I said, Coastal's 1/10 the size of SoFi. So how are they ever going to do loans or business banking the size that SoFi can do, because they're constrained by their banking relationship? And you're right, they're going to go to small banks for a couple of reasons. One is the debit cards, they get that under 10 billion, and there's also some other advantages to that. But also it's very difficult, people underestimate the degree of connections between big banks and big brokerages and the regulators, right? And so is a big bank going to partner with Robinhood? Some may, I doubt it, right? Because they're worried about the same thing that Noto's worried about. Noto won't talk and stuff. They're worried about associating with somebody who gets them. There's a morass of regulations, and what are they going to do? I think that Robinhood will probably, or if they haven't already, they probably identified. They're real smart. They've identified other banks to do this with. Coastal is just the best one for them right now. That's why I bought both of them. I think everybody is like this. Robinhood versus SoFi doesn't get the different markets and doesn't get how they can both be profitable. Like if you go back, it's an interesting thing to go back, because I traded their stocks during this time from 87 to like 2000, and go back when Apple was up and Microsoft was down. Microsoft was up and then Apple was down. Apple, they went back and forth because there's a period where the Lisa screwed Apple and they got off their focus, and Microsoft did better. Then Microsoft screwed up with June and they got the iPod. They go back and forth. I was investing in 2000 in Microsoft. They were stuck at $30 for like 3 or 4 years. And then now they're like, got up to several hundred because they just boosted up, because it's a cyclical thing and they have a different customer base. But you got to find your customer base. There's a lot of customers for both these guys. They just got to find their customer base. And for Robinhood, I'll tell you that Robinhood has a greater ability to get inroads against customers of Schwab, and they should capitalize on it, because don't wait for SoFi, and not only SoFi, but all these other banks to catch up. But right now, where you see the destruction of branches and all the branches closing, the wealth management departments of these big banks, except for, JP Morgan is always an exception, they're having difficulty. And because they're being squeezed by their wealth management clients. At Wells Fargo, they were lending money to their wealth management customers for less than they were paying them on their cash in their bank. And they were taking that loss. And this is what happens. This is the benefit of having all your assets managed at 0.5%. Because, same thing that investment banks do. Why would the investment bank give like Elon a 2% loan for 2%? Well, because they're managing his billions of dollars at 0.5% or 0.25%. And it's just a cost benefit analysis. Do we give him extra $100,000 of benefit of interest when we're making $7 million on the thing? And I've had those conversations when we had when I was a managing director of a wealth management company. Is like, you go to Goldman, who is doing this, say, look, you're managing this, give us this, it's going to cost you something, but it's still going to be okay. Give us a break on the collar, right? They're reluctant to do it, but if you're like managing like Jim Clark's money, $4 billion or whatever, you're going to get what you want. You're going to be squeezed. Whenever, the biggest benefit you have when you have more wealth is if you have service providers, you can squeeze all of them, because if you're providing like hundreds of thousands of dollars to them, they're going to benefit you, and you pick them apart. And there's no better people to squeeze you for money than billionaires, because they didn't. A billionaire once I talked to, I said, why don't you give more to charity? And he goes, if I gave more to charity, I wouldn't be where I am today. It's not my nature. But you think about that. because you don't get to be, basically, you don't get to be a billionaire by giving money away to anybody for anything at all.
Unless you start a social media company in the early 2000s.
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's been interesting to see this stuff grow. It's been interesting to see your guys' channels grow and stuff like this. This is kind of a, the market's kind of giving us everybody a temporary setback. But I saw today on one of the chats that somebody who got liquidated out of their margin stuff, and I kept telling people, like Roy did today, I think, or yesterday, I was like, now's not the time to do anything margin and think you're going to make all the money fast. People get they make mistakes by thinking they can, and I did the same thing, so I'm guilty of it. You make money fast, and you don't realize that some of it was macro luck, and so you think you're really smart, and then you get hit really, really hard. It happened to me, so I know it, and I'm never gonna get myself in a position to be at that. I always hedged everything I did. Anytime I had a big bet or option contracts, I always hedged it a little bit, so 50, making 10% on everything is better than making 50% on stuff. And if you're wrong, you lose all your money.
Sure.
So margin can kill you. Even selling, buying options can kill you too if you don't do it right. It's like most you guys have the benefit your age of having the internet and knowing, basically reading about how to do it. When I started, nobody would tell you how to do it. And when I was doing it, the fees were incredibly high. Like I do an option contract for $2,000, my fees were $400. Well, so options didn't get traded as quickly, so you could actually get in and out of them it was actually easier back then because of the fees. So it's just the environment is so over the period of my investing, the environment's changed so more beneficially to investors, and Robinhood's part of doing that.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
So you can't criticize them for what they're doing, but I just try to point out things that I would do, and like if you want to keep the sports betting, have a minimum, right? You're not going to lose that much, right?
Also,
you're still going to get
really quick. Well, you just brought that up. You said that Robinhood really benefited the retail investor. I was listening to Compound and Friends, and Stephen Quirk was on there, and he said that Robinhood brought the fractional share. No, they didn't. SoFi did.
Good.
So they're helping out the retail investor too. Stolen valor there, Stephen. No, I love you guys.
Well, you get all, if you want to actually get critical about it, isn't Robinhood now using what's one of SoFi's taglines? What was it?
Get your money right? Are they doing that?
No, it's something like that.
One-stop shop?
Yeah, one-stop shop. We're the one that's going to be the one-stop shop, so they stole that one.
Yeah. They will be interesting. I'm a big believer of that, actually.
But 7-Eleven's a one-stop shop. Doesn't mean you can't find other places that sell the same stuff 7-Eleven does. It's how do you maintain, one of the reasons that my understanding is, because I didn't work for him, but I know people that do, that Steve Jobs was always wanting to be rapid product development and secretive product development and keep pushing his people to do more and more and more. And you come up with these bizarre things like, I want to scroll. And apparently when they first come, that people looked at him after that meeting and said, is he out of his fucking mind? Right? He wanted to scroll. Now, look, how many people scroll now? Like everybody, right? And so there is some detriment if he says, we're going to try to figure out how to scroll the 3 years it took him to do it. He wouldn't have had such a lead on that. So, then it's offset by getting into the market sooner is always better, right?
Yeah.
Being the first to market is always an advantage. That's why people say, I want to be the first to market. So you have to look at but I try to look at companies and say, like when I was SoFi, I said, this would be pretty good because I have X amount of dollars in the bank. I'm never going to default on a credit card. They could give me a premium credit card where they make nothing on it. And just having my money in their order flow and stuff, they're going to make a ton. And so I've always been against banks' high interest rates because I've known people, for being poor, a lot of people that got hurt really badly by interest rates and they couldn't pay it back. Or you get the people in the case of a bank with a mortgage where they said, you have a 8% mortgage and you want to refinance to 5%, and they say you don't qualify because you can't afford a 5% mortgage. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I got a 9% mortgage I'm paying with your bank and I've never missed a payment. Why can't I qualify for a 5% mortgage? And the answer is because they want 9% from you. And so if people ask me, why do I like SoFi Bank and banks like, why do I like Robinhood? Because you don't have to pay any fees when you buy and sell stocks with, at the start. Why do I like SoFi? Because, people, they don't emphasize enough. There aren't any fees. I have Bank of America business accounts. I get in arguments. I got to call them all the time about all the fees. It's a fee for everything, right? Same thing with like ADP, which is a great service for your payroll, but they call you constantly. But for trying to sell their products from like 10 different offices across the country, and same thing. And then they get you in at a discount, and it's like, okay, now it's twice as much. Now it's twice as much again, and you got to keep calling and do it. What you really don't like when you're running a business is having to deal with the time it takes to deal with these issues. So that's what's good with Robinhood. You don't have to deal with that. You know what you're getting into, and that's what's good with SoFi. You don't have any fees. You don't have any fees on your accounts, no matter what you do. You don't have any, writing checks. My checks, when I get them from Bank of America, it's like $65. You can get them SoFi for free. Business checks, like even Blue Vine, Coastal. Go look at Blue Vine's business offering and how much fees that they charge for their business checking. That's not going to work. I'm going to move my business accounts one time, and I'm going to move it to somebody who doesn't charge me fees.
Yeah, and that was one of those features I didn't even know about when I moved to SoFi. And then I was like, somebody had mentioned it. I'm like, really? I can get free checks. I don't use them often, but I'll go through a book, like every other year or so. And I'm like, sure, I'll go ahead and sign up for that. Versus like Wells Fargo, it was just always it wasn't like really expensive, but you had to pay, and it took a long time, and it wasn't fun.
Well, here's the other thing: is you used to get like 100 checks for $50. Now you get 40. They're almost $1 a check. And I looked the other day, I go, $1 a check? Really? And I thought, I got to get everything online and not use checks anymore.
Yeah. You can't get cash delivered though. And that is the problem.
It's very niche. Although checks are becoming very niche as well. So
yeah, I was just thinking the cash thing is I don't think I ever use cash. No, I never use cash unless I'm, I would use that service at like 6 o'clock on a Friday when Mega Millions is $800 million and I don't have any cash and I lost my ATM card. I'd be calling up, but you want to pay like a 7 or 3.5% tip. You want to pay a tip to get your cash. I mean,
I actually think it will be used. I definitely think it'll be used. I think it'll be used at Vegas. I think there'll be places where it's cool to have your cash delivered and people will choose for that luxury.
Well, it's going to be like the actual smart summoning for Tesla. It's not that useful, really. Like there's a few niche cases where it is, but it's mostly a flex, and that's what the cash delivery is. It's like
it's like hey, if you want it, we have it. It's not going to. I'll bet you guys anything you want to be is not going to be a big revenue producer for.
No, not at all.
No, but I think it's almost like a referral. It's like a referral generator.
well, if they tie that with it's going to be delivered by a Victoria's Secret model, I'm switching over.
I mean,
we don't know the partner that they're partnering with, so I mean, long calls in that company too, I guess. No,
I'm sure there's going to be a poly market for that.
Do their customers want that flex? Their cards are literally gold. Yes, their customers want that flex.
Yeah.
Like yes.
There's a lot of different people. That's my whole point about different customer bases. There's a lot of people that think things are cool or important that I would never spend money for, right?
Agreed.
And there's probably a lot of things that I would do that people go like, why would you spend money for that, right? And or what, because I like to learn a lot about a lot of stuff. My son's disabled, and I do a lot of research on not only type 1 diabetes but autism, and I will pay for stuff like there's some site has a paywall, and I don't pay for paywall for anything because I don't want to do it because I think you do it on the internet. I paid for this site because I wanted all access to all the research, and so nobody would want to do that. But everybody has their own little niche of what they like for their benefits, right? Some people like travel cards. Some people like cash back cards. You know, I mean, like one of the products I think that is very successful at Citibank that Noto should consider is if you're a certain level of customer, I get offers all the time. I can borrow money for a year at 5%. I just write a check, and I pay it back. I get paid 5% interest. And you say, okay, well, 5%. How's the bank make any money? Well, here's how they do it, because you borrow enough and it hits your credit, or you're paying it back month after month, so you're actually paying 10% interest, right? But it's a very convenient product that I have actually used on a number of occasions, because I'm like, okay, the painter's here. The painter wants 10 grand. I look at my accounts because I manage my cash accounts down to low to put stuff in investment accounts. I go, oh, I need $10,000. I say, okay, well, I'll just pay the guy the $10,000 a check and I'll pay it back in a year. And I paid 5% on it. So who cares? I mean, 5% is kind of I'll borrow money all day long under 5%.
I just realized the time. We're at 1 hour and 40 minutes on this hour-long thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, you guys just got a free membership to the SoFi Weekly After Hours show, because this is both shows in one. To the people who actually paid, I apologize. You definitely did get your extra benefits along with everyone else who didn't. But yeah, let's wrap.
Okay, let's do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for watching. If you guys want to find any of these other beautiful people, we have our X below our names there. You can see it. And thank you, Tim, for following that same format. So
yeah, it's always great to come on your show. You guys are great.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Yep.
Aside from that, thank you all so much for watching. Really do appreciate your time. Bye for now.